So the Neo65 that's come out relatively recently is has kind of been blowing up the internet a little bit. I don't know if you guys have seen, but there's been quite a lot of reviews out recently about the Neo65 that really kind of talk about how it's this amazing budget keyboard that kind of blows everything else out of the water, and it's like the one to get, right? So I decided to take a look at it. And what I do like about the Neo65 company, or the vendors at least, are essentially doing constant orders. It basically seems like this keyboard is just in stock, but they're doing it kind of in batches, right? So I was not able to order during the first batch because I missed it. It seems like they have a new batch of keyboards ready to be built. So I was able to order 2 of them actually in the colors that I both wanted. And today we're gonna build one out, and we're gonna see if it's actually really worth the hype that it seems to be getting. Now, opening up the box that it comes with, the Neo65 comes essentially packaged in its carrying case, but there is also a separate cardboard box on the side of it. Now, opening this one up, we see that there's a cable, a keycaps puller, a screwdriver, and the stabilizers. Now, opening up the main carrying case, we see that there is the keyboard on the bottom, and then a flap where, very similar to how Mode has been doing their things, that comes with like little packets for all their stuff. So we have the daughter board ribbon cable, then we have the rubber feet. In the last pack, we have the gummy O-ring mount or the gaskets. So the thing that's cool about this keyboard is that it can be mounted in 2 different styles, right? You can either do gummy O-ring or you can mount it with the silicone gasket. Now, in the upper package, we have the PCB board with basically a foam packet. Now, what's cool about this PCB is that it doesn't have any flex cuts. You know, it is going to be a little bit stiffer like this, but I feel like the tone hopefully will be a little bit better. And then behind we have our plate. Now, the plate I decided to go with is a polycarbonate plate. Now, this build is actually going to be a Christmas present for my nephew, and so I figured I would just get him something that, you know, is pretty typical. Polycarbonate is pretty neutral in terms of tone, and I think it'll sound good. Building out the keyboard is the next step. So we're gonna go ahead and put together the stabilizers. Now, the interesting thing is the stabilizers that come with this keyboard kit are clip-in stabilizers. Now, I find that to be pretty rare. I find most keyboard kits come with some variation of like the Durock V2s, or the Cherry screw-in stabilizers. Those seem to be pretty common. So the fact that these came with clip-in stabilizers, I thought was pretty cool. Now, at first I thought these were maybe like a version of their TX stabilizer, but after putting them together, the tolerances are a little bit looser. TX has really tight tolerances, which kind of what makes them really nice. And here's kind of one of the issues that I have, and I think this is kind of where the price starts to really kind of show itself, is when I was clipping in the stabilizers, you get this little, I don't know, this little plastic bit, which is supposed to help keep the clip like held in place onto the PCB. And these were just like really hard to put in. I spent way too long trying to push in this little plastic tab just to get the stabilizers to stick in place. And to be perfectly honest, the stabilizer performance from just some initial testing seems to be okay. To be honest, I think I would just go with a set of owl stabs. Again, those are my favorite stabilizers, screw-in stabilizers. And I think just in general, while clip-in stabilizers seems like a good idea, I think just with ease of use and then with just some nice screw-in stabilizers, you'll be done way quicker, and you'll have like a really solid stabilizer. And this time we're actually going to just be using all the foam. So we're going to be using the PE foam, and then on top of that I'm going to be using the plate foam. And then just remember, this kit does come with standoffs, so make sure you get those installed. The first time I actually put this together, I forgot about the standoffs, and I started putting in all the switches. And yeah, make sure you install the standoffs. It'll help with switch installation, and it just kind of makes everything feel a little bit more solid. Now, the switches that we're going to be using today are the Kinetic Labs Penguin. These are linears. I just thought the color scheme might look nice. They're also they're a pretty decent switch as well. more of a deeper tone, not super heavy switch, but kind of like medium in terms of weight, and they're really nice. Now, once I got the switches on, I think actually the board looks pretty nice. I decided to attempt with the gummy O-ring mount first, so I put that on because I've never actually installed or used the board with a gummy O-ring mount. Here is kind of where I really started to, I don't know. So this board is very well built, right? So the board itself is a single unibody aluminum design, which I actually really enjoy. The only other keyboard that so far that I've built that does this is the Mode Envoy, and I just think anyone who can pull off a unibody design is pretty cool, and that's cool. And it also has a brass external weight, which again I like. It gives some heft to the board, it adds to that premium feel. But then they made a really interesting decision. So in order to connect the daughter board, you basically have to remove the weight and then connect the ribbon cable that you get to the PCB. Then once that's there, you have to essentially seat the PCB, the board, into the case while snaking the ribbon cable through the bottom of the board, which then comes out the back. And the reason why you remove the external weight is because this is kind of where it comes out from, and then you connect it to the ribbon cable connector that's in the back. It's an interesting design. I personally don't really like it, but I can see why they did it, because one, this helps hold the board into the case, right? Because we don't have any sort of like standoff screws like the Mode Envoy does, and this basically just kind of holds it in there. Now, one thing I did notice was squeezing the board in with the gummy O-ring mount was actually very difficult. I had a really hard time squeezing this in, and to be perfectly honest, even after getting it in, I didn't really like how the board felt. There seemed to be very little, if any, flex, and it felt really hard. It felt almost like you just kind of put the board on like a piece of stone and then we're just typing on it. So I didn't really like it. I also had some issues with the stabilizers, so I ended up just kind of like pulling everything out, reinstalling it with the silicone gasket mounts. I actually think these feel a lot better. It actually made installing the board also a little bit easier, so it was a little bit less frustrating, and there is some nice bounce and flex to the typing experience now, which I actually enjoyed. And I think the silicone gasket mounts might actually be the way to go. Yeah, I think the board sounds a little bit better. But anyways, once you snake the ribbon cable through, you then have to screw the external weight back on. And again, this is kind of where I feel like that they tried to do something to make it more cost effective and something more innovative, which I really appreciate. But I also felt like this makes taking apart the board actually kind of difficult. You kind of really have to pry, and I think they realized this too, because behind each of the batteries, there's actually two holes where you basically can put your thumb and just kind of push the board out, and it seems like that's what they want you to do in order to remove the board. I don't know. For me personally, it just makes it feel cheap. And yeah, so once seating everything in, the keycaps we decided to use are these keycaps that I found at a local keyboard store called Dragon Type. They're just like a really cool blue and white gradient type of keycap set, DISA PBT. Now, one problem that I had with this is the I key. I think the I seems to be missed. It seems to be off. Like you can tell it's not perfectly straight. That seems to be the only key right now. It's a little frustrating because this was an expensive keycap set. I believe the keycap set itself was $70. And you know, when you pay $70 for a keycap set, you kind of expect every key to be, you know, the quality control to be up. So that was a little bit disappointing. But anyways, once we install the keycaps, let's see how it sounds. So this board sounds very interesting to me. We have all foam in there, right? We have case foam, we have PE foam, we have plate foam, and we have a polycarbonate plate. And we have, we have switches that supposedly sound, deeper, right? So like thocky, if you will. And this board just doesn't really sound like that. It's really, really weird. There's this weird resonance where the board itself, it just doesn't sound very deep. The tone isn't super, super deep. There's these weird overtones to it, and I'm not really sure if that's just due to the body design. Now the alpha keys sound okay, but I think where I really have issue is actually the top row where the number keys are. They just sound really, really dull. And there's this weird scratchy tone to it as well, which is weird. And I thought maybe these were the keycaps, so I basically took them off and put on, another set of keycaps. And to be honest, it sounded the same. It's weird. I don't know what it is, but every single time you like push down it, there's a weird scratchy tone to it. I'd say tone wise is probably where this keyboard suffers the most. It's a weird keyboard. I feel like it's something that it's a keyboard that I find if you're really kind of getting into the hobby and you want something that's not going to break the bank, that you can build yourself, this is actually a pretty good option, because the Neo65 is really not that expensive. I believe after everything I paid about $140 including shipping, which is not that bad, right? So $30 for shipping, and then the board itself was like, the most expensive part about this was actually the PCB, which is $55, and then the board itself was, something around like 30 or 60, something like that. Basically the price came out to be about $110 and then $30 for shipping. So $140 for this kit to be sent to you. Really not that bad. And so I like that it has a lot of like the high-end stuff, right? So it has tri-mode. It's a tri-mode PCB, Bluetooth, wired, and USB, and it's a unibody aluminum design, external brass weight, multiple mounting styles. So really good in terms of features, very similar to a lot of the high-end stuff. But there was something about the building process that I wasn't really enjoying myself quite so much. If I compare it to, let's say, the Zoom 65 or even the Tofu 65, I find those two to be more fun building experiences. Those are more expensive. You're literally looking at like anywhere between $60 to $100 more expensive for those two. But I think that's kind of where the price really comes into play, right? You're paying for a better build experience. And it's something that you don't really think about when you're purchasing these kits, but it's pretty important. That's not to say I can't recommend the Neo65. I actually absolutely do recommend it, especially for beginners. I actually think in a way the harder building experience can be good, because it really can teach you about the difficulties of building a keyboard. Other than that though, I think it's a pretty fantastic beginner keyboard. They're in stock right now. I believe QWERTY Keys is selling it on their website. If you just Google Neo65, you'll be able to find it. It's really cheap. There's a lot of good features to it, and it's a really good beginner full kit, right? Because there's a lot of beginner budget keyboards that are effectively pre-built, even without switches and keycaps, but the entire board is put together. This one you have to put everything together, and I think that's definitely worth it. Hope you guys enjoyed the review of the Neo65, and yeah, we'll see you guys all in the next one.